This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
I went to Rome and I don't really get the artistry of all these sculptures. It just seems like there's a bunch of muscular men with tiny penises. Anyway, so I was thinking about, I was on Facebook and I saw a video of some Eric Clapton playing, and that's what that backing track that I was playing over was kind of inspired by. It's kind of moving from chord 4 E flat to D minor to G minor. Kind of, yeah, quite a straightforward vamp. Not actually that bluesy, you know, you think of Eric Clapton, but it kind of, I started looking through some of the comments on it, and this is a thing that I've seen. So if you see a blues player, whether it's someone like John Mayer, Eric Clapton, whoever it is, you'll see a lot of people saying like, it's so godlike, the phrasing is amazing, and then you'll probably find someone lower down in the comments saying, you know, there's 1,000 players that could do that sort of thing, or, you know, basically expressing that they feel like it's overrated. And similarly, if you go to someone like, I don't know, Matteo Mancuso, so when all that stuff with Matteo was popping off, you'd see, you know, people saying in the comments quite a lot, you know, fantastic player, but so many notes, it doesn't do anything for me. And I feel like there's this interesting dichotomy of like, do you play like a blues player and risk being called boring, but you end up rich probably? Well, you probably don't. Probably most blues players are not rich, but the very best blues players, or the most famous blues players, they do probably better on the whole than the very best shredders, right? I don't know, let's do some analysis on that. So you've got John Mayer, maybe, is probably like one of the richest blues players living. Who's the richest shredder living? I don't know, leave your thoughts in the comments. But I imagine, you know, like, although, think of like a massive John Mayer aged shredder. Is there one? I don't know, maybe that's the conclusion. If you want to make money, you better not be shredding. I'm trying to think of one. Someone like John Mayer's age and that. Maybe there just isn't one. But anyway, my thought was that you actually probably, to stay fully invested in your own playing, want to take a bit of stock and look at, maybe listen to your own playing. And so what I did was, I kind of did a take where I was thinking like, be more Eric Clapton. Now obviously I don't really play that much like Eric Clapton. However, I was just thinking like, let's just try to leave a bit more space for these phrases to breathe. Let's try to, I don't know, to repeat a phrase a bit more. But inevitably, what happens to me, and I think this is probably a good thing to try and kind of bring yourself back down to, because all shredding all the time, I did some more takes which are a bit like, well, let's just kind of play fast as much as possible. When you listen back to yourself playing, it's kind of like, well, okay, but what have I got there to grab onto? And I think this is one of the things, so that for sure, I can kind of understand when people, because I can see it in my own playing. If it's something where I'm just trying to play fast and kind of frantic, it's not necessarily as easy to listen to, it's not necessarily as pleasant to listen to, as when I'm actually just kind of trying to be in the moment and trying to maybe connect things without getting super flash and showy with it. What is actually going to grab people's attention when they're scrolling past stuff, it could quite likely be some of the shreddy stuff. So I think it's important to have like a balance of both. And so maybe next time you're practicing, you think to yourself, right, well, let's kind of do this yin and yang thing where I'm going to try and kind of just relax for a bit. And I think of someone like maybe like Adam Levy for this kind of stuff, or as I say, Eric Clapton, or maybe even John Mayer, and just think, right, let's just lay back a bit, you know, 3 notes are good, 2 notes are good, let's leave some space, and then kind of build a solo, maybe just stay in that mode for a while, and then maybe you go, okay, well, let's try and push the envelope a bit. I think if I never try to do the kind of faster stuff as well, would I ever really get there? Does it matter? Probably not. I guess not really. But for me, my favourite players are able to kind of do both. Like if you think of like Eric Johnson, where it's like, well, yes, there's incredibly melodic playing, but sometimes there's this really flashy stuff. Someone like Marco Sfoli, yes, there's incredibly melodic playing, but sometimes there's a faster run. If you think of John Petrucci, the stuff that I love about John Petrucci was blending both like really singing kind of lead playing with faster bits. That's what got my attention initially. So for me, I think you need both, and I think you don't need to do anything, but I think listening to some blues players, trying to get some of that back into your playing. I think Matt Schofield is a guy who's on TrueFire who I think I'm going to dig into a little bit more, because there's a guy that's very much bluesy, kind of sophisticated bluesy, but kind of does simple things, or fairly simple things, and makes them sound awesome. And I think that's part of what blues playing can be about, right? It's more about the feel and the tone and the shape of the note than it is about, you know, thinking too much about, you know, what scales and that sort of stuff. It's relatively simple. I think actually it's deceivingly simple, because to actually play blues and sound really good is way more difficult. And there's a whole thing about like actually playing blues is not just about pentatonic stuff. But also, you know, shredding takes a lot of work as well. And for sure, for me, like my teen years, a lot of time and focus was spent on the shredding stuff. And I think of something like sweep picking, which, to be honest, like a sweep picked arpeggio, I've never found a use for live, except for, jokingly, there's a bass player in a band that I play with occasionally called Charge, and he says, I'll do some sweep picking over Mr. Brightside, and I say, no, I'm not going to do that. But blues type phrasing and blues type feel is, I think, some of the kind of most sought after stuff. You think of someone like Landau, you think of, you know, Lukather, all of these players, there is definitely a bluesy tinge to their playing, even when they're playing in pop stuff. And so I think you need a bit of blues, even if you are a shredder, right? That's kind of my take on it. And it was kind of like, well, you look through these comments, are blues players overrated? Well, maybe in some cases they aren't necessarily pushing the envelope as far as your shredder might, but actually that's music that people are going to see and stuff. Do shredders lack feel? I can kind of see that some do, but for me the very best of the shred stuff, like Guthrie Govan, Matteo Mancuso, Sean Lane and people like this, Alan Holdsworth, yes, there will be some bits that are really kind of difficult for the average person to listen to, but hopefully in there as well there will be some really pretty kind of phrasing, pretty stuff as well. So I think you need a little bit of both maybe to get a good sounding solo. Anyway, here is a kind of bit of a more shreddy take on that same thing. I don't know, let me know your thoughts in the comments if you've got any. And your favourite blues players, your favourite shredders. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Cheers for stopping by.